Have you ever seen someone completely break down? Not because of what happened, but because they were trying so hard to control what shouldn't happen? Maybe it was you. That silent spiral, overthinking a comment, obsessing about a text that never came, lying awake wondering, what if they don't like me? What if I'm not enough? We carry so much: expectations, approval, control, and sometimes it's all just too much. But what if I told you that happiness doesn't come from adding more to your life, but from finally letting go? Letting go of what's weighing down your soul. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share might feel like exactly the permission you've been waiting for. There's a Buddhist teaching that says, the less you care, the happier you become. But let me be clear, that doesn't mean you stop caring about your family, your passions, or your purpose. It means you start caring less about what steals your peace. You stop carrying what isn't even yours to hold. See, in today's world, we've been trained to cling to success, to being liked, to being seen a certain way, to control. But here's the hard truth. Most of the things we stress about are outside our control. And deep down, you already know this. You just haven't been given the tools or the space to release it. That's where this wisdom steps in. Let me ask you, when was the last time you felt peace, not because things were perfect, but because you stopped fighting what is? When did you last feel free, not because you had everything, but because you no longer needed everything? Real peace is quiet. It doesn't scream for attention. It's that moment you realize, I don't need everyone to understand me. I just need to understand myself. I don't need to win every argument. I just need to be okay with silence. That's what letting go looks like. I'll be honest with you, I used to overthink everything. I thought if I just tried hard enough, I could avoid pain, avoid rejection, avoid disappointment. But the harder I tried to control life, the more life controlled me. Then one day, I sat in silence. Not to meditate, not to do anything profound, just to rest. And in that quiet, I realized, I've been trying so hard to protect myself from suffering that I've forgotten how to simply be. That was the turning point. Not some big revelation, just a quiet surrender. And maybe you're ready for that moment too. So, what does it actually look like to let go, but still live fully, love deeply, and stay engaged with life? How do we stop caring about the wrong things without losing our connection to the right ones? That's exactly what we'll explore next. And it might just change the way you breathe forever. 1. The simpler the mind, the deeper the happiness. Let me tell you about someone I know. Let's call her Emily. She was successful, owned her own business, had thousands of followers on social media, smart, kind, always polished, always praised. But every night, Emily felt completely drained. Not from the work, but from the constant noise in her mind. Did I say the right thing? Did they like that post? Should I have smiled more? Should I have said less? She wasn't living her life. She was managing a performance. And maybe that sounds a little familiar to you too. You smile when you're tired. Apologize when you've done nothing wrong. Nod along when you disagree, because it's easier than explaining yourself. Somewhere along the way, we learn to overcomplicate our minds just to feel like we belong. But here's the truth Buddhist wisdom reminds us of. The simpler your mind, the deeper your happiness. Because happiness, real happiness, doesn't come from doing more or impressing more. It comes from caring less about what doesn't matter so you can care deeper about what truly does. Let's go back to Emily. One day, she broke down in her car, not because something big happened, but because her friend didn't text back. And somehow, that tiny silence felt like a scream. That was the moment she realized she was exhausted from keeping up with what everyone might think. She said something to me I'll never forget. "I don't even know what I think anymore. I'm just busy thinking about what they're thinking." Can you relate to that? That feeling of spinning in your head, replaying conversations, reading between the lines, trying to control what others feel about you. But the truth is, their thoughts aren't yours to carry. And your peace? It's not up for debate. What if you didn't need to be liked by everyone? What if you didn't have to explain your silence or justify your no? What if your worth had nothing to do with anyone else's opinion? That's what simplifying the mind really means. It's not about becoming cold or careless or shutting the world out. It's about coming home to yourself, letting your mind be a quiet place, not a courtroom of constant judgment. It's about saying, I don't have to prove myself today. I don't have to perform. I can just be. In Buddhist thought, there's a deep respect for inner stillness. The more we reduce the mental clutter, the more space we create for what matters: presence, love, compassion, clarity. And peace isn't some distant prize you get after you fix everything. It's something you can start tasting the moment you stop chasing approval. So maybe today, instead of checking how many people liked your photo, check in with how you feel about yourself. Instead of asking, what do they think of me? Ask, am I being honest with who I am? Because the less noise you let in, the clearer your truth becomes. And in that space of simplicity and self-trust, you'll find a kind of happiness that doesn't depend on anyone else. Not because life became easier, but because you stopped complicating your own mind. 2. Letting go is not loss, it's liberation. Let me tell you about Mark. He held on to his marriage for 2 years after it had already fallen apart. Not because there was love left, not because they were growing together, but because letting go felt like failure. He told me, if I walk away, doesn't that mean I gave up? So he stayed, through silence, through resentment, through the slow decay of something that once brought him joy. And the hardest part? He wasn't holding on to the person. He was holding on to the story of what should have been, of who he thought he had to be. We all do this, don't we? We hold on to jobs that drain us, friendships that no longer feel safe, versions of ourselves we've outgrown. Why? Because we think letting go means we lose something. But here's the truth, one that Buddhist wisdom has whispered for centuries. Letting go is not the same as losing. It's not abandonment. It's not failure. It's liberation. The Buddha once said, "You only lose what you cling to." And at first, that may sound harsh, but it's also incredibly freeing. Think about it. When you finally release something that no longer serves your peace, a toxic relationship, a harmful belief, a regret that's haunted you, you're not losing a part of yourself. You're making room to come back to yourself. Mark eventually left that marriage, not with bitterness, but with a quiet, steady choice to choose peace over pretending. And what he told me months later was this: I thought I was walking away from love, but really, I was walking toward it, just in a different direction. And I found myself again in the silence I used to avoid. Letting go isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as closing your laptop when your body says it's tired. Sometimes it's not texting back just because you feel guilty. Sometimes it's choosing not to argue, not because you're weak, but because peace matters more than being right. But here's the inner conflict we all face. There's a part of us that wants safety, routine, familiarity, certainty. And there's another part that craves freedom, truth, change, lightness. Letting go requires us to trust that what we release will not define us, that we are more than our titles, more than our past, more than what we used to want. There's a beautiful image in Buddhist practice. Imagine holding a burning coal in your hand. You grip it tighter because you think it's yours to carry. You convince yourself, if I just hold it long enough, maybe it won't hurt. But it does. And the longer you cling, the deeper it burns. Letting go isn't the pain. Holding on is. The moment you drop it, you don't lose anything except the suffering. So let me ask you gently, with compassion, what are you still holding on to that's already asking to be released? Is it a version of yourself you no longer believe in? A mistake you keep replaying in your mind? An expectation you can never seem to meet? Whatever it is, you don't need to fight it. You just need to see it clearly and choose not to grip so tight. And no, it's not easy. Letting go often comes with grief. Even when you're releasing something that hurts you, there's sadness because it meant something once, because it was a part of your identity, because it gave you comfort, even if only temporarily. But peace comes not from avoiding sadness. It comes from honoring what was and still choosing your truth. The Buddha reminds us, nothing is truly ours. Not our possessions, not even our own bodies. Everything is borrowed. So why let it own you? The moment you realize that nothing truly belongs to you, you begin to move through life with more lightness. You stop gripping so hard. You stop measuring your worth by what you keep. You stop trying to control what was never yours to begin with. And in that space, you breathe again. You feel again. You return to yourself. Letting go is not the end of something. It's the beginning of you. Not the you that performs. Not the you that pleases. But the one who is whole, even when you carry nothing at all. Because in emptiness, there's clarity. And in surrender, there's strength. So today, maybe just loosen your grip. Not on everything. Just on one thing that no longer brings you peace. And see how it feels. To walk a little lighter. To live a little freer. 3. The more you care what people think, the more you suffer. Let me introduce you to someone. Her name is Rachel. She's the kind of person who always smiles in group photos. Always says yes, even when she's exhausted. Always checks the room before speaking, just to see if what she's about to say might be too much. From the outside, she looks like she has it all together. But when she sits with herself, at the end of the day, she's tired. Not tired from doing too much, but from trying too hard to be liked, to be approved, to be enough. And I want to ask you something, not as a lesson, but as a reflection. Have you ever lived like that? Editing yourself in conversations, overthinking texts, apologizing just for existing in a way that might not please everyone? If you have, you're not alone. Because somewhere along the way, we were taught something really dangerous. That our worth is tied to how others see us. That if we can just get enough people to approve, to applaud, to accept us, then we can finally rest. But here's the truth that Buddhism and life eventually teaches all of us. The more you care what people think of you, the more you suffer. Because the more you depend on the outside world for validation, the more you abandon your own truth. There's a quiet danger in living for approval. Because even when you win, you lose. You gain the praise, the likes, the acceptance. But you lose touch with yourself. Your voice becomes softer. Your needs feel like a burden. And every decision becomes a game of, will they still like me if? The Buddha taught about this illusion over 2,500 years ago. He said, "Those who cling to praise and fear criticism are like drifting leaves. They go wherever the wind blows." Imagine that. A whole life shaped not by your soul, but by other people's opinions. Opinions that shift daily, hourly, even by the minute. That's not peace. That's prison. Now, let me go back to Rachel. One day, she was passed up for a promotion. Not because she wasn't good enough, but because she didn't advocate for herself. Didn't speak up. Didn't want to seem pushy. And it broke her. But not because of the job. Because it was the moment she realized. She had spent most of her adult life performing rather than living. Always adjusting. Always pleasing. Always chasing some invisible scorecard of being liked enough. That moment became her turning point. Not an easy one. Because letting go of people-pleasing isn't just a decision, it's a practice. It means learning to disappoint others so you don't keep disappointing yourself. It means walking away from conversations where you're not fully seen. It means sitting in silence instead of explaining yourself to someone who isn't listening. It means giving yourself permission to just be you. Unfiltered, unpolished, unapologetic. And I know this is hard. Because most of us, deep down, just want to belong. We want to be accepted. We want to be safe. But the deepest safety doesn't come from external approval. It comes from internal alignment. From knowing that who you are, when no one is clapping, is still worthy of love. There's a powerful shift that happens when you stop asking, "Do they like me?" and start asking, "Do I like how I showed up today? Was I kind to myself? Did I speak my truth? Did I live in a way that honors my values?" That's the path to freedom. Not because it guarantees people will like you, but because it means you finally do. Let's be honest. Some people will misunderstand you no matter how kind you are. Some will criticize you no matter how much you give. Some will leave you even when you try your hardest to stay lovable. So why keep performing? Why shrink? Why filter your soul to fit into rooms that were never meant for you? The day Rachel stopped asking, "Will they approve?" and started asking, "Will I regret betraying myself?" was the day she came home, not to a place, but to herself. And that is the ultimate liberation. So if you're listening to this right now, and you're tired of being who you think they want you to be, here's your invitation. Start small. Say no when you mean no. Say yes when you mean yes. Speak honestly, even if your voice trembles. Rest, even if no one applauds it. Let them think what they think. Because you have a life to live, not a performance to perfect. Peace begins the moment you stop needing others to validate your existence. Buddhist wisdom. And that peace, it's waiting for you, right on the other side of approval. 4. Acceptance of impermanence is the key to freedom. Let me tell you a story. There was a man I once met in Northern California. His name was Tom. Mid-50s, sharp mind, kind eyes. He had spent nearly 3 decades building his own business from the ground up. It was his pride, his identity, his life's work. Then one day, a fire swept through the valley, and in less than 12 hours, everything he built was gone. Gone. Now you'd expect heartbreak, anger, maybe even despair. And of course, there was pain. There were tears. But what struck me most wasn't his grief. It was his peace. When I asked him how he was holding up, he said something I'll never forget. "I've practiced letting go for years. This is just the final exam." That's when I realized he wasn't just talking about the fire. He was talking about life. Because the truth is, everything changes. People, plans, feelings, health, wealth, love, even the things we hold dearest, slip through our fingers eventually. And yet, we live like they won't. We cling, we grasp, we beg life to stay exactly the same. But life doesn't listen to begging. It listens to flow. The Buddha said, "All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering." In other words, if we resist change, we suffer. If we embrace it, we awaken. But let's be honest, that's easier said than done. Most of us fear change because it makes us feel powerless, out of control, like we're floating in uncertainty with nothing solid to hold on to. But maybe that's the point. Because when everything outside of us becomes uncertain, we're invited to find certainty within. Here's something to reflect on. What if the pain you feel isn't because something changed, but because you expected it not to? What if the real freedom isn't in keeping things from changing, but in learning how to dance with change like water? Water is such a beautiful teacher. It adapts. It flows. It doesn't argue with rocks in the river. It moves around them. It doesn't resist the shape of the container. It fills it. And most importantly, it never forgets its nature. No matter where it is still, rushing, frozen, or vapor, it remains water. What if we lived like that? Flexible, but grounded. Adaptable, but steady in who we are. Able to let go without losing ourselves. I once heard a monk say, "If you build your happiness on things that change, your happiness will always be fragile." Let that sink in, because we all do it. We build our peace on relationships, on jobs, on health, on having everything under control. But when life moves as it always will, we're left shaken, afraid, confused, unless we've practiced, unless we've trained our hearts to let go gently but fully. Tom, the man from California, lost everything he thought made up his life. But he didn't lose himself, because for years he had practiced seeing clearly that nothing is truly ours. Not permanently, not forever, not the house, not the status, not even the people we love. Everything is on loan. And the more we accept that, not with despair, but with grace, the lighter we become. So I want to ask you, what are you still clinging to? What do you believe you must have in order to be okay? Can you hold it a little more gently today? Can you whisper to it, "I love you, but I don't own you. And if you must go, I'll let you." Because that is strength. Not in control, but in surrender. Not in grasping tighter, but in softening your grip. This is not a call to apathy. It's not about giving up on life. It's about showing up fully, knowing it may all change tomorrow, and loving anyway, loving boldly, living deeply. Letting go again and again, not because you're weak, but because you've realized nothing was ever yours to keep, but everything was yours to experience. That's the quiet gift of impermanence, not loss, but liberation. If this message stirred something in you, stay with us. Because in the next part of this journey, we'll talk about the art of non-attachment and how it frees you not from love, but from fear. Until then, let it flow, let it change, let it go, and know you are still whole. 5. It's better to disappoint others than to abandon yourself. Let me ask you something. Have you ever said yes when your whole being was screaming no? Agreed to something you didn't want, just to keep the peace? Swallowed your truth, just so you wouldn't upset someone else? Yeah, me too. There's a woman I know, let's call her Elena. She's the kind of person everyone leans on, always smiling, always saying, "Sure, I can help." And from the outside, she seemed like the most generous person in the world. But behind that smile, she was tired, worn down, resentful, and quietly disappearing into everyone else's expectations. One day she told me something that hit me, like a bell in an empty room. She said, "I spent years being who everyone wanted me to be, but I forgot who I was." Sound familiar? The truth is, we're taught to be nice, to keep others happy, to not rock the boat. And there's value in kindness, absolutely. But when being nice means betraying ourselves, that's not kindness anymore. That's self-abandonment. And that is a wound that runs deep. In Buddhist wisdom, compassion begins with the self. It's not selfish, it's sacred. The Buddha taught that true compassion doesn't ask you to burn yourself out to keep others warm. It asks you to first understand your own suffering and not add to it. So no, letting someone down doesn't make you cruel. And saying no doesn't make you heartless. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is protect your own peace. Let's get honest for a moment. Why is it so hard to disappoint others? It's not just about being polite. It's about fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of not being good enough if we stop performing for love. So we perform. We bend. We become versions of ourselves that feel acceptable. Until one day, we look in the mirror and barely recognize who's looking back. But here's the paradox. When you abandon yourself to be loved by others, you end up feeling unloved by yourself. And that kind of loneliness is the deepest kind there is. The courage to live honestly isn't easy, especially when the world is constantly pressuring you to conform, to fit in, to smile through your silence. But think about this. If someone only loves the version of you that pleases them, do they really love you? Or just the mask you wear? I want to invite you into a new kind of bravery. The bravery of disappointing others if it means being true to your soul. Not out of rebellion, not out of anger, but out of deep, compassionate clarity that says, I will no longer abandon myself to be accepted. I choose truth. I choose wholeness. I choose me. And here's what's beautiful. When you begin to live from that place, the right people stay. The right peace follows, and your life starts to breathe again. You laugh louder. You rest deeper. You begin to attract relationships built on truth, not performance. There's a Zen teaching that says, let others have their opinions. Let others live their lives. You stay true to yours. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that keeps you small. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to walk away from what drains you. You are allowed to say, "This doesn't feel right anymore." Because that voice, inside the quiet, sacred one, it matters more than applause, more than approval, more than keeping the peace at the cost of your soul. So today, I'm not asking you to be selfish. I'm asking you to be brave, to speak when it's easier to stay silent, to rest when the world tells you to keep going, to say no when your heart is begging you not to say yes again. Because maybe, just maybe, living your truth is the greatest act of love you can offer this world. And if someone is disappointed by your truth, let them be. They'll survive. But your soul deserves to thrive. If this message speaks to something you've been carrying, stay with us. The next part of this journey is about setting loving boundaries, not to push people away, but to invite deeper, truer connection. You are not alone, and you are worth being heard exactly as you are. 6. You don't need to control everything to be at peace. Let's be honest. How many times have you felt this rising tension inside? Because life wasn't going exactly the way you planned? You told yourself, if I can just fix this, if I can just get that person to do what I expect, then I'll feel calm. Then I'll feel in control. Then peace will come. And yet, the more you try to control, the more chaotic it feels, right? I want to tell you a story. A friend of mine, Mark, is the kind of guy who's always got a plan. Spreadsheets for everything, backup plans, even backup plans for his backup plans. He's smart, successful. But you know what he told me one day, completely exhausted? I'm tired of living like I'm constantly holding the universe together by a thread. And I looked at him and asked, what if you let go and trusted that life doesn't need your grip to keep flowing? He laughed, but something in his eyes softened. We've been taught to believe that control equals safety. That if we just try hard enough, hold tight enough, anticipate everything, we can prevent pain, prevent failure, prevent disappointment. But life doesn't follow scripts. It flows, it shifts, it surprises. Sometimes gently, sometimes like a wave that knocks the wind out of you. And if we resist that flow, if we fight every change, every unknown, we don't find peace. We find exhaustion. In Buddhist wisdom, there's a simple yet powerful reminder. Peace does not come from control. Peace comes from trust. Trust in the flow of life. Trust in the law of cause and effect. Trust that if you plant good seeds with patience, with presence, the right fruit will come in the right season. Not always when you want it, but when it's meant to arrive. Think about it like this. You don't scream at a tree to grow faster. You water it. You give it light. And you trust the process. But with our own lives, we panic when things take time. We try to force outcomes. We forget that control isn't the same as clarity. Here's a question worth asking. What if peace has nothing to do with having all the answers, and everything to do with learning to breathe, even when the answers haven't come yet? The Buddha never promised a life without pain, but he did offer something far more powerful, a path through it, a path that teaches us to show up with kindness, even in chaos, to take mindful action and then release the outcome. Because in the end, you can't control how the world turns, but you can control how you walk through it. With grace, with presence, with faith that what you sow you will eventually reap even if the fruit looks different than expected. Mark told me something months after our conversation. He said, "I started letting go of the need to manage everything, and I realized something shocking. Life didn't fall apart. I just finally stopped feeling like I was falling apart." So today, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're gripping tightly to an outcome, a person, a plan, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, have I done what I can with clarity and compassion? If the answer is yes, then maybe, just maybe, it's time to trust the rest to unfold. Let go of the illusion that control is your lifeline. It isn't. Your real power, it's in how you show up with calm, with kindness, with courage to surrender. Because the truth is, you don't need to control everything to feel peace. You just need to trust yourself and trust the path, even if you can't see where it ends yet. Stay with us, because in the next part, we'll explore how embracing uncertainty doesn't weaken us. It actually opens the door to a deeper kind of strength, a strength born not from resistance, but from deep, fearless presence. You're not alone in this journey, and you're doing better than you think. 7. Letting go creates space for presence. Let me ask you something real. When was the last time you truly felt a moment? Not just watched it happen, but actually lived it. Like your whole being was fully there? Not thinking about yesterday, not planning for tomorrow, just present. I remember sitting with an old monk in Thailand years ago. We were watching the sunset in silence. No words, no phones, no distractions. Just the breeze, the sound of crickets, the golden light slowly fading behind the trees. And at one point he turned to me and said, "The moment you stop clinging, you'll notice the world was always here, waiting for you." That sentence never left me. You see, we spend so much of our mental energy holding on to expectations, to regrets, to stories we tell ourselves about how things should be. And then we wonder why we feel so tired, so anxious, so disconnected. It's like trying to hold your breath forever. At some point, you forget what breathing even feels like. But letting go, that's different. Letting go isn't about giving up. It's about making space. When you stop gripping so tightly to control, or fear, or past pain, you finally have room to just be here. And sometimes, here is enough. More than enough. You ever notice how a child finds joy in the smallest thing? A leaf, a puddle, a cloud. They don't overthink it. They don't analyze it. They're just present. We were all like that once, until the world taught us to carry too much. Buddhist wisdom teaches that the root of our suffering is attachment, not just to people or things, but to ideas, to identity, to the constant pull of, "I need more," or "I'm not enough." But the moment we release that tension, even just a little something incredible happens. We hear the sound of the wind again. We notice the kindness in a stranger's eyes. We feel the ground beneath our feet like it's the first time. And that's the heart of it. Letting go opens the door to presence. And presence is where peace lives. You don't have to fix your whole life in one day. You don't need to solve every problem to feel alive. Sometimes, the most radical act is to pause, to breathe, to sip your coffee without checking your phone, to look at the sky without rushing to the next task. Because this moment right now is all you truly ever have. So here's something you can try today. Take just 5 minutes turn everything off, close your eyes, and let go of whatever's been circling in your mind. No judgment, no effort. Just let it fall away and see what remains. Maybe it's silence. Maybe it's your breath. Maybe for the first time in a while, it's you, fully present. The monk once told me, happiness is not hidden in some distant goal. It's hiding in the space between two thoughts if you're quiet enough to notice. And I believe that. So the next time your mind races or your heart feels heavy, ask yourself, what if I didn't have to hold this right now? What if I just let it go for a moment and stepped fully into now? You might be surprised how light presence feels. In the next part, we'll go even deeper into what it means to truly see life as it is, not as we fear or hope it to be. Because when you learn to live here, not there, you begin to realize you were never really lost. You were just distracted, and presence brings you home. 8. Not every criticism needs to be followed. Let me ask you something real. How many times have you changed who you are just to please someone else? Or stayed awake at night, replaying someone's harsh words, wondering if maybe they were right about you? I want to tell you a story, not from a book, not from a movie, from a real place, my own life. Years ago, I started sharing my voice online. Simple things, reflections, small lessons I'd learned, inspired by Buddhist teachings. Nothing fancy, just words from the heart. At first, some people resonated. They reached out, thanked me, said it helped. But then came the other voices. The ones that didn't just disagree, they attacked. You think you're so wise. This is just spiritual fluff. Who do you think you are? And for a while, I believed them. It's strange, isn't it? You can hear 100 kind words, but that one harsh voice, that one cruel comment, can echo louder than all the rest. We're wired to want acceptance. It's human, it's ancient. But what Buddhism gently reminds us is this: not every voice deserves a seat at your table. Some criticisms come from love, from people who want to help you grow, even if they don't say it perfectly. But others, they come from wounds, from jealousy, from fear, from misunderstanding. Sometimes it's their pain speaking not truth. And if we let every voice in, if we shapeshift every time someone disapproves, we slowly lose the most sacred thing we have, ourselves. That's why the Buddha didn't say, ignore all opinions. He said, be mindful. Be wise enough to listen, but free enough to choose what stays and what doesn't. That's not arrogance. That's inner peace. Here's something I learned the hard way. Discernment is freedom. You can listen without obeying. You can receive feedback without changing your essence. You can say thank you and still walk your own path. Because you were not born to be everyone's favorite version of you. You were born to be you. So the next time someone criticizes your choices, your voice, your dreams, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, is this truth? Or is this projection? Is this helping me grow? Or is it shrinking who I am? That pause, that tiny moment of clarity, that's where your power lives. In Buddhist tradition, there's a beautiful practice. When someone offers you a gift and you don't accept it, it stays with them. Criticism works the same way. If it's not yours, don't carry it. You don't have to fight every voice. You don't have to explain yourself to everyone. Sometimes, the most courageous thing you can say is, I hear you, but I choose peace. Because not every comment deserves your energy. Not every opinion is your teacher. And not every moment is yours to fix. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by other people's judgments, come back to your breath. Come back to what you know is true. Because deep down, under all the noise, you already know who you are. And no one, no voice, no criticism can take that away from you. Conclusion. Letting go isn't weakness, it's strength. You know, most of us are taught that strength means holding on to goals, to people, to control, to what we think should happen. But what if real strength, the kind that brings peace, comes not from holding on, but from letting go? Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you've stopped clinging to what you can't control. You stop trying to force life into your plans. And instead, you start flowing with it. I used to think happiness was something I had to build. Layer by layer, success by success. Add more achievements, more approval, more things. But somewhere along the way, the more I added, the heavier life felt. Until one day, I just stopped. Stopped chasing. Stopped performing. Stopped pretending I had to hold it all together. And in that silence, in that space I had never given myself before, I found something I didn't expect: peace. Buddhist wisdom says, happiness doesn't come from adding more. It comes from needing less. Less expectation, less control, less attachment to how things should be. And from that quiet, a kind of joy begins to rise. Not loud, not flashy, but deep, steady, unshakable. It's like standing still in the middle of a storm. The world may not change, but something inside you has. So, if you're tired, if you're worn out from always trying to fix, to prove, to be everything for everyone, maybe it's time to release. Let go of what's not yours to carry. Let go of the stories that no longer serve you. Not because you're giving up, but because you're choosing peace. And maybe, just maybe, what you've been searching for isn't something you need to find, but something that's been waiting for you all along, underneath all the noise. If someone came to your mind while listening to this, someone who could use a little stillness in their life, go ahead, send this to them. They might not say it, but they're probably carrying more than they show. And if that someone is you, just know this: you're not weak for letting go. You're wise. You're not broken for wanting peace. You're waking up.